Everyone, thank you for joining us today. And I would like to introduce Ken Davis. Ken is at Grow Pro Genetics in Illinois, and Davis is the co-owner and commercial director at Grow Pro Genetics. He graduated from the Ohio State University with a BSc in agribusiness and applied economics and received his master's in seed technology and business from the Iowa State University. He has spent his entire career in the seed business and managing portfolios for Monsanto, KWS, and Syngenta. Davis has worked as a regional, national, and international levels at seed trading. His career functions have revolved around creating business units for seed brands in North America and product development. In 2020, Davis successfully coordinated the acquisition of Syngenta soft wheat breeding program for GrowPro Genetics, and Davis represent the seed industry on the steering committee level. With that, I would like to welcome Davis, and please, you can take it on.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Lawrence, for that kind introduction. It's always fun to share a little bit of our experience and perspective, and hopefully get some feedback from your team and your peers. But yeah, so thanks again for having me. It's been a pleasure serving a very short period on the steering committee with the SCAB initiative, but it's been pleasurable and really a good opportunity to meet a lot of influential researchers, up and coming students, and things of that nature. So I've got a pretty short presentation prepared for you. Um, just a handful of topics. Bear with me, trying to move ahead. There we are. Oh, too quick. So, quick intro. I think Lawrence covered it pretty well, actually, so that'll go fast. And our perspective on scab tolerance. So, as a private seed company or independent seed company, how do we look at fusarium tolerance compared to the way you do in your program? We'll talk a bit about the economics, some of the business and applied principles of disease tolerance, specifically scab, of course, and then a little bit of marketing and how the countryside observes scab tolerance on the farm. So, from an intro standpoint, I always tell my team we are a family first company. Their goal is to work hard and then get home safely. And so this is my family. I got a wife, Brittany, and two kiddos, and we are based in Southern Illinois, right outside of St. Louis. Warden is about 30 minutes from St. Louis. So that's the kiddos. They're a little bigger now. This photo's dated, but she can walk now. She could probably walk then. Education-wise, Lawrence hit on this. I'm originally from Ohio. I grew up a military brat, so I didn't grow up on a farm. I get asked all the time, why on earth would you choose agriculture? But it was a great reason, a great way, I should say, to get an education without being in the classroom. So being a hands-on person, learning from experience, ag and plant science really spoke to my heart. And then you meet great people, travel all over the world, and that pretty well kept me within the trade. So got a good education from a few land grants, and there's a big gap there I should mention between my bachelor's and master's. So I did wait a little while to go back and get my master's of seed tech or seed business. And the reason being was because my career took a little bit of a different turn from commercial to more R&D or pre-commercial. So with that said, this is kind of again another perspective on some of the entities I've represented over the last almost 20 years. You wear a lot of different hats, mergers and acquisitions happen. So you want to be flexible and look for opportunities where you can serve and be the most productive. My journey took a bit of an entrepreneurial or independent route, which has been awesome, very liberating after working for over 10 years in the corporate world. We operate a small team now, and it's pretty nice, really simplified way to go to market. But that's my background or pedigree, so to speak. This is our team. So this is kind of the core group of folks that I work with. Many of you already know Alan. He's the head of our research program. He's our wheat breeder. Like myself, he's got 20 plus years experience in plant science. He's a graduate of University of Illinois. And so he understands plant science, scab tolerance at a pretty high level, and also serves on the scab initiative within the committee structure. Eli's been with us since our origination in 2020. He runs our station, and he actually has been promoted to an ops manager role. So he helps me on the back end of getting a lot of the logistics and seed preparation ready for trialing. So a big help. And then our latest addition is Cody. He's actually been with us almost 3 years now, maybe four. But he's our research tech. He manages our student and our intern program, which has grown pretty consistently over the last 5 or 6 years. So that's the core group. And then I mentioned interns. I learned after I relocated to Warden that a lot of our function, of course, we're a private seed company, but we are educators as well. We kind of shepherd 6 to 8 students through our program every season. A lot of them also do not have agriculture or backgrounds, or they're not ag students, city kids actually. But they take a liking to our trade, enjoy being outside, learning about plants, and with a lot of different backgrounds. Some of them do have science in their majors, maybe biology. We get some engineering students. This young lady here, she was a geology major. And some of them go on and take roles within the seed trade. So we introduce them to our network, and if they find space and opportunities to work, we give them good referrals, recommendations after a 12-week program with us. So it's really grown to be a good program, and we've introduced a lot of students that otherwise wouldn't know about a seed, let alone wheat, to our business. This is not a part of our team. This is just a nod to our history. We are over 100 years old from a germplasm standpoint. So our pedigree was founded way back in 1914 in South Carolina, Hartsville area. And some of these names and faces you guys will recognize for those of you on the call with experience. But just like your lineage and your family uh, pedigree, our germplasm really has a rich tradition, a lot of investment, a lot of really talented breeders, and technology has went into the germplasm that our team stewards today. In fact, in a couple weeks, we'll be down in this area for the Eastern Wheat Workers meeting. So I'm excited to kind of go into our stomping grounds and meet with the rest of the group. And then I had Alan more recently take a selfie in front of the old Coker shed is actually still sitting there. So he'll be added to this list once he retires. So the last part of our team, not with us every day in terms of variety selection and advancement, but we do have a lot of associates, over 30 AgriPro guys. So that's our branded route to market, and over 30 licensed partners that are also great stewards, marketing, selling, wholesale, retail, products once they're finished goods. And so we always want to acknowledge them. They're spread all over the country, as you can see. But they are no less essential to what we do in the world of R&D. So that's kind of the team as a whole. I am going really quickly here, but hopefully this will be available later, or we're pretty open. If you have questions, or we like to think we're accessible, send us a note, or if you have want more detail about this, because I am going to move pretty quick. This is our mission and vision. This is right off of our webpage. Any organization you do business with, whether you work with them or for them or they're a supplier, it's good to know kind of what they represent. It's healthy to take a peek at their mission and vision, and hopefully aligns with your professional or educational desires as well. My favorite part from this is the purpose or the core values. which include research, awareness, and service. So those are the three pillars, kind of the more functional parts of our vision that we make sure we are aligned with. 80% of our resources are aligned or invested directly into R&D. So we are a research company as opposed to production, retail company, or anything like that. So we want to make sure we keep that at the heart of most of our activities, staying aware of what's going on in the countryside, and then being willing to provide service to um, really anyone, our client group, students, peer to peer, but just having that attitude of service is really important for our business. So that is who we are. Again, I kind of touched on this a moment ago, but in a nutshell, we have more than 80 distribution partners. Our plant breeding home base or facility is based in Southern Illinois, right outside of St. Louis, and we do focus on the soft red growing area. So if you summarize that in a quick timeline, this is a good visual to kind of see that 100 years of progress. Excuse me. There was a few other smaller acquisitions and changes within there, but you can kind of see the progression of the germplasm changing hands over the years. And if business history repeats itself, times change, and there's always something new happening in the commercial world. And finally, I think most of you guys know this, so I don't want to spend a ton of time here. But obviously, like I mentioned, we specialize in soft red wheat. I always tell folks that are not aware, our wheat is used to make the fun stuff. So cookies, crackers, pretzels, things of that nature, as opposed to flour and pasta and things like that. But again, I think you guys are a sophisticated group and know all this already. So I'm going to skim over this in the essence of time. So now let's move into the more fusarium related part of the spiel. Um, you know, a lot of the folks on the call represent public institutions, whether it's academic, USDA, or so forth. But I think you'll be encouraged to see that what we do on the private side is very similar to what you're studying or what you're working with. So we enjoy partnering with you, not just in the series like what we're doing today, but in the field. We have a lot of exchanges with some of the land grant schools, and we appreciate that. We learn from each other, and we try to keep a really open mind as we help you guys and vice versa. I put together this quick slide because it's a little humorous, but we are committed to our scab nursery, and so the photo at the bottom is our humble abode there. Right after we moved in 2021, that's a picture from the front yard. Well, it was the front yard, and it didn't take us long. I think that fall we tore it up and we made a fusarium nursery out of it. So the team ran a water line, and if you look closely, you can see misted irrigators out there. And it worked out pretty good until we had a bad storm and it knocked down the sign. And so that was replaced here more recently. We're happy that the wheat stood. There's probably a campaign in there because we didn't have any lodging, but the sign did go down. So we put new footing and got the sign back up, only to realize that the birds were eating the wheat before we could get good scores, ratings, let alone samples. So if you pay attention, you look closely, those power lines seem to be nice nests for the birds. They just wait there for the heads to come out, and they would eat our wheat. And so last year, we put up a bird net to protect our beloved fusarium nursery from any bird damage. So now we've got a good sign, we've got a bird net, and surely nothing else can go wrong. But the point of sharing this with you is that we are really committed, not just to our nursery, but you'll see in a moment, we spend a lot of energy trying to identify scab in other ways. So, and I kind of broke it out into two kind of areas where you look at, fusarium tolerance in the field. So a lot of different field measurements. We're looking at comparisons, multi-year typically, but compared to, say, in this example, if you look closely, you can see heading date. or maybe you can look at freeze injury. You can look at a lot of cross-correlated measurements just in the field and try to get a good bearing on how much fusarium tolerance you have in your material or in your population. So we're measuring these things every year in various different ways. But one of the things I emphasize, especially as we move to the end of the breeding funnel, is we want to make sure the methods and protocol that we use can be applied. So realized and executed and actually observed by the farmer. Because if it's something that doesn't ultimately have quantitative value, or we can't find a return on investment, then we always question whether or not it's worth having resources put into it. So that's something I challenge my team to each year to make sure we're aligned, not just with R&D, but make sure there's a way out of the research investment. So this kind of speaks to that funnel. This is a classic breeding schematic, early stage on down to breeder seed or stage 6 in this example. But it kind of helps you visualize where we start our scab evaluations. So early generations, we're looking at populations, getting that first impression. And then as we ascend or proceed through each stage, we're looking at more broadacre testing and more individual plot and varietal results. And so we're capturing that information from primarily the 6 sites that my team can plant themselves. And most of those are in Illinois, Missouri, or in the Boot Hill area of Kentucky. And that's about as far as we can stretch our team, equipment, and so forth. And the other locations are really are 100% third parties. So we have cooperators, swaps. We really anyone who does really good trial work, we're generally going to give them a try because that can be a data point that we otherwise would not get locally. So we use all this information, we capture it as early as possible, and we add it to our database for fusarium to enhance our fusarium tolerance. So in addition to, the visual observations, visual scab scores, we cross-validate with deoxynivalenol testing or DON testing. And so we send our samples to the lab. And again, many of you do this as well. And the source of that can come from various places. Typically, it comes from our nursery where we have the highest ppm and we can really see separation. But if we have hotspots in any of those other 30 or 35 sites, we'll grab samples from there as well. And what I want to emphasize in this chart, so this shows DON part per million and by the rating across the bottom. And ultimately, you want to be on the left side of this chart. And so if you have a product that has a really good observed field score, and you say, wow, this thing is really showing resistance to fusarium. And the farmer says, great, I want that. And he goes across the scale at the elevator and he gets tested, like many of them do, for DON content. And it's no better, then that's not good. And we see a lot of that in the field in terms of talking to our seed partners in years where scab is bad in particular. Their observed scab ratings are not nearly as good as what the results of the DON test share. So you don't want to be in that top right quadrant. And similarly, again, if you've got a really high scab score, and I go out to a seed company and say, hey, don't worry, it's got really low DON, I'm not going to be successful. And so you don't want to be on that bottom right-hand quadrant either, because visually, you're never going to be able to get that to market, even if the DON is low. So right now, what we see a lot of is what's in the top left quadrant. You see the low scab score. However, the DON is not always as low as you think it would be. And where we ultimately want to be is in that bottom left with low DON and a really low fusarium score. And this is a 1 to 9 rating, 1 being better. So we talked about scab scores, we talked about DON. Something else we dabble in, I won't say we're experts in this space, but is in the input response area. So we've been doing this, and you'll see here in a few slides, but we've been doing a good amount of management studies, well, since I've been with the program, so 2017. But even to date, we've really never missed a year without having at least a few locations where we're doing with and without fungicide. And so when you compile that information with the presence of the DON results, along with the scab score, you can really provide layers of information for farmers to make decisions on, especially those that are trying to determine if they should or should not spray. And so here we did multiple applications. We're looking at a flag leaf. We're looking at a flowering, a 10-5-1, of course, and then an untreated check. And I don't want to dive too deep in the details, but I just wanted to share the concept that this is something that we test and that we add to our decision making and selections when we look at fusarium tolerance. But more to come on the input studies. So in this chart, what we're looking at is a handful of cultivars or products that are in our portfolio, looking at their field rating next to the QTL that was noted through the marker test, DON, and then what type of resistance are we looking at, type 1 or type 2. And so as you look across, I think there's some build slides in here. This one, despite the presence of 3B and type 2 resistance, you're seeing a pretty high field rating at a 6. And so I know this product pretty well. It gets plenty of fusarium. And so we always caution our partners to say, well, if it has a 3B QTL or FHB1 marker, that's great. But be careful because it may exhibit the same symptoms, let alone DON, as some of the products that don't have that type of resistance. And so we see a lot of variation here, and that's something that we're really trying to build more layers into as we look at our program, just being more critical and not just using the presence or absence of our marker test to make all of our advancement decisions. And then finally, I apologize for the spreadsheet here. It's a pet peeve of mine to present spreadsheets, but this one's really simple. It's just a illustration of the parts per million out of our fusarium nursery. So sometimes, you can see 7s, 8s, or even higher. Typically, the results don't go. They just say more than 8 or more than 9. They don't go higher. And the variation or the spread in this material from our DON test. And so that's something we do pretty consistently, and that's something I think I'm sure your programs do, but we want to make sure we have those layers in our advancements. One of the final things we'll talk about, again, more of a laboratory measurement, is the testing that we do for FHB1, among other markers that help fight fusarium tolerance. So FHB1, as you guys, I believe, know, is the most effective to date, and it's certainly the one most prevalent in the market. Both types of resistance are great for stopping the presence or the spread of fusarium. But there are also others. And so as we begin to experiment with FHB7 and look at the correlation between FHB1 and other traits, there's a lot to learn in terms of genotyping as we run these panels on our early stage material and make sure we have those layers in our selection protocol. There's one more thing I discussed this morning with Alan, and that's in relation to our predictive breeding. I don't have a slide here for that. This is a newer space, but if I had to think of something where we want to enhance or an area that we continue to improve, I think our modeling and some of the algorithms and coding that we're applying to our selections, kind of the machine learning. I know a lot of you guys have experience with looking at the correlations and the models that can suggest crosses and suggestive results. We are seeing scab pop up as a trait that is predictable, certainly more than yield, which can be volatile, maybe not as much as, say, test weight, but it's something we want on the radar when we build our models and we set our training populations to find the best products digitally. So not just with the visual eye, but using our knowledge and experience to do these things in the lab, so to speak, not in the field. So that's an add-on, but no slide for it. And then finally, we enjoy sharing. So everything we just shared, obviously, we're speaking with you, but we had some customers out to the greenhouse space. We're in the Danforth Plant Science Center. That's a really nice state-of-the-art facility, but we brought a few guys out. On the left, they're trying their best to pull anthers, and what they're really doing is growing their appreciation for your trade. And so we try to demonstrate, how challenging it is and the skills involved, and try to create an open space for them to appreciate their investment in seed and fusarium tolerance. In the center, it's just one of our students sharing her work with us. She had one of her projects was to look at some FDK results, analyze and correlate it with Dawn. And then finally, we have fun over winter and invite guys out again to the greenhouse, take them to a hockey game to try to promote what we do. Maybe bring some humanity to some of the greenhouse work that we all tediously work towards. All right, so now let's keep rolling to the E, FHB economics. My background is heavily weighted in the economic business space, but I do appreciate the value being created and what potential lies for higher fusarium tolerance in the market. So we'll try to monetize that and at least help us think through ways that we can demonstrate and capture value with higher fusarium tolerance. But the first rule they say of any game is to know what game you're playing. And so this is a little bit of a macro perspective, but if you look back over the last, say, 7 to 8 years, you can see we're right around average, around that 6 million acres of soft red winter wheat. And that number is important, especially as you drill down into your marketplace, as you think about the potential acreage infected, the dollars spent, whether it's in fungicide or in research, or maybe it's in retail and wholesale exchange. But it's important to have a high level appreciation for how many acres or the size of the market that we're in. And I always challenge our friends west of the Mississippi that although our acres are smaller, the value per acre is higher. And so what that means is the cost of seed, the amount farmers are willing to invest, the royalty rates, the retail price, it's significantly more. And so although we're only 7 million acres, I would challenge our friends in the West and say the value is a lot closer to those other 40 million acres of wheat than you might suspect. But that's for a whole nother webinar. This is the same information provided by the USDA, just looking year over year at the changes, blue being an increase, red a decrease, and then gray from an acreage standpoint being the same. And again, I know you guys are pretty sophisticated, so maybe even seen this before, but I just wanted to set the stage in terms of the marketplace, how we see it. A lot of guys argue with the USDA within their local markets and say, no, there's not that many acres is typically what we hear. But at least to start the conversation, this is a good space to be. So this is arithmetic, and so if you stick with me, this is a good way to do a market evaluation. So this is really napkin math, not too complex. But if you look at those 7 million acres and you say, all right, the average seeding rate per acre is 2.5, multiplied by a 0.7 rate. So you say, why is that? Well, one of the challenges we have, as most of you know, is save seed. Some guys refer to it as fanning or bin run or brown bag. There's a lot of different ways to describe the fact that we're not able to capture all the value that we create in the marketplace. If we did, that number would be 1, or I guess we wouldn't even need it. But it is a reduction because unfortunately, there are challenges with IP and value capture where we have to reduce the amount of actual seed purchased when we do this kind of math. But again, roughly speaking, you can say there's 12 to 15 million units of soft red winter wheat in the marketplace. And the royalty rate is a big range, from 50 cents up to $4. and you can say its average is around 2. And so you can kind of see the value of the marketplace if you do this kind of math and what opportunities exist for breeders to capture, whether it's through traits like FHB or parent seed sales, or there are many ways of value capture that we're going to talk about here in just a few moments. But again, that's kind of the stage and the marketplace that is available. Keep rolling. This is a slide that's a little bit complicated. I always debate whether or not to keep it, but it does bring into consideration all the different ways that your hard work and research can get to the marketplace. Now, most of you would be familiar with breeder seed, which is the end of the channel or your research funnel, but it's really the beginning of the pre-commercial stages of a new product coming to market. So after Alan, for example, hands me a handful of breeder seed, I say, well, this will probably take 3 years to mass produce and get any type of reasonable volume. And so it's really a game of patience and perseverance. Once you have something really exciting in hand, you want to make sure you're going through the right channels to get it to market and capture that value. And all those check marks on the right are things to consider as you try to develop the latest and greatest fusarium tolerant wheat. Again, I'm really rushing through this. There's a mouthful on this slide, but just some consideration for you guys as you do your diligent work as researchers. So earlier I mentioned some of the challenges in value capture and IP related to soft red wheat. Our pledge, we started this back in 2022. It's known as the PASS program or Product Assurance System. But ultimately, this is our commitment to high quality seed that's protected, patented, and produced with a lot of integrity. And so you can rest assured, when you invest in our material, it is backed by a viable manufacturer, and you can track and trace the IP. And in our case, we have patented most of our wheats since that time, as opposed to the PVP, which is a little less protection. Still good, better than nothing. But we upped the ante and we put patents on our wheat starting started the process of patenting back in 2021. So just something to think about. Your wheat seed is a long-term investment, and no matter what part of the value chain you're on as a stakeholder, you want to make sure your cart is attached to organizations that have a long-term future as well. So as we move into some of the marketing of fusarium tolerance, I wanted to acknowledge some of our partners. So these are the entities that help us get fusarium tolerant wheat to the marketplace. And there are hundreds of seed companies that sell and promote wheat. These are just a few. They range from really small independents to multinational seed companies that distribute, really all over the world, but all over the country. So these are outfits that we advise and recommend, and are doing their best to abide by the systems and investing in our wheat, which in partnership with you is your wheat. So when you see these organizations, know that they kind of represent some of the things we're discussing today, and the kind of people that you would want to partner with. All right, so now to wrap up, the last section here is more specific to marketing fusarium head blight tolerance. And so let's imagine a world where we have something really exciting, something that's going to really be a step change in disease tolerance. And now what do you do with it? So there's a lot of different representation, and once you have a product like that in your hand, you say, well, how do you want to promote or market that? What type of individuals, what type of systems and data do you want to use to promote your technology? And so there's a lot of ways. If you look online, there's tech sheets, there's charts and graphs and all these scores that you're familiar with. But each company does it a little bit different. So it can be a little tricky because there isn't a regulatory authority that tells seed companies you must use a 1 to 9 scale, or you must make sure your scores are relative to the whole market, not just your portfolio. What about Dawn? What about FHB1? And so seed companies really make it their own. And so you have to be mindful when you go to market how your material and your hard the material you worked hard to develop is represented. And so that's something I try to capture here, just to be thoughtful about where the material ends up and how it's ultimately published and promoted to farmers. The last thing you would want is to overpromise and then the product not deliver or undersell. We get accused of that a lot. We're not a marketing company. Sometimes I wish we were, but the feedback we often get is our products are better than we advertise, and we should do better sharing good news, I suppose. But in our case, we don't have the structure for that. You know, we don't have the bandwidth and the resources to become a marketing company. So ultimately, we rely on those other guys to do a good job. So I again just kind of looked through a couple of things, individuals that we know of that are out sharing information on fusarium tolerance. And, you know, as I kind of prepared for this, I said, well, here's a handful of things that are important as you look at partnerships and seed companies to represent your material. It needs to be concise. You know, there's so much research anymore, so much information. And a lot of the times, as I try to convey what's transpired, our partners say we got to keep it simple. You know, give us the short version, make it really relatable, and something that you can get out in an elevator, right? So you don't want it to be so complicated that it can't be picked up and disseminated quickly. There's an acronym in the world of marketing, you know, they call it features, advantages, and benefits. So that's one way if you look at a trait, in this case, FHB, tolerance. You say, well, what are the features, advantages, and benefits of this trait? What does it do? What does it do that's above and beyond the marketplace? So start to think about the baseline or the status quo and what your trait and what your material does better than what's available today. Keep good integrity on your R&D. You know, you don't want to run into anyone that's not scoring properly or misrepresenting data. And then in a small market, you know, a small world, you really want to leverage your partners. We can't do it all, as I've mentioned a few times, so we use a lot of partnership models to get us from A to B. So just a handful of things, and then the photos, again, these are screen grabs. When we've seen, this is going back over 10 years ago now, easily. When we started to see more FHB1 material in the market, it was promoted pretty loosely, where seed companies were simply asking for the presence or absence, and then they were going and promoting that. Whether or not it actually had scab tolerance just seemed to be secondary. And so we're recovering from that. I think we've got to do a little bit better job of getting that information out. And the photo in the middle, those are our friends in Canada, Ellen out of C&M Seeds, and Pete, or Wheat Pete, he's known as. He's quite a personality in the world of wheat, but they were doing a pretty good representation of the differences between you know, type 1 and type 2 resistance. And so that's the kind of thing that we want to see as opposed to blanket statements and kind of a broad application. So this is a campaign. Speaking of marketing, yes, many of you know our organization was acquired from Syngenta. But prior to that, Syngenta is really a chemical company with a seed division. But we worked a lot on Mirvis, and before it came to market, this is a older data set from our friends in Bay, Arkansas, where their research station was. But we were basically just looking at the difference between Mirvis and Prosaro, looking at the timing. And Mirvis it was just coming to market, but we really helped them create some good data with one of our products at the time, older variety, SY Viper. But ultimately, this is something a program and a fungicide that really changed the game for fusarium tolerance. And they were able to capture value not just with the quantifiable results here on the right, but also sharing that farmers had a better window of opportunity to spray their wheat. So those two things combined really made Miravis what it is today. It's the number one fungicide by a long shot, even compared to some of the ones that have come along since. And so I share this as an example as you think about FHB tolerance, that there is room if you have a significant step change in performance to add value. Right now, all wheat is generally priced the same. And so you don't see added value put into, say, a seed guide or a marketing campaign for traits the way you would corn or soybeans or other ag inputs. And that's a shame. I think there is room if we've created something noteworthy that's actually creating value for a farmer. My experience is they're willing to invest in it. And so that's a challenge maybe to our trade and our community to say, hey, if we've really done something, let's not undersell it. Let's go out and partner with the people who believe and know it works. And I think we could actually create quite a bit of value in our marketplace. So just to kind of wrap things up here or summarize, I got a few slides left, but you want to ID your route to market. Once you have really good material, something exciting, a step change, figure out if you want a license or have a direct approach, an end user agreement. How are you ultimately going to bring value back to your organization, your school, or whoever you represent? And make sure you settle on reasonable terms. Sometimes you get in the world of licensing and contracts, it can be complicated, but I would testify that trust is the number one thing. If you work with people with high integrity, a lot of these things solve themselves, and you can rest assured it's a win-win scenario. So just three slides left here. Culturally, kind of like I was sharing, trust is really important, but you really have to meet people where they are in our marketplace. If you're trying to get something exciting into the hands of farmers or to seed companies, it may not be through the channels that you're most comfortable or most familiar with. As I said, we're not really good at marketing, but someone's got to do it. And so we step into it as individuals who really are more researchers or behind the camera, so to speak. And we try to meet people wherever. Sometimes it is in the field where we're comfortable. Sometimes it's in a shed. Sometimes it's on social media. Sometimes it's in a webinar. And so you just never know. There's a couple shots of our guys, Cody, there in the shed with a few seed partners. This guy here on Facebook, I just met him a couple months ago, and apparently he likes our hats, and a lot of people like him. And so I found him, and I said, "Well, thanks for wearing the hat." A lot of people. He said, "Well, thanks for making good wheat," and that was pretty much the extent of our interaction. But I found him. I met him where he was at a farm show, actually, and told him thank you. And he said, "Well, keep making good wheat, and I'll wear your hat." And he's one of those influencer guys. People enjoy his commentary online. Some of you might know him or follow him. But again, this is not our space, but we're trying to stay engaged as much as we can with all these different ways to communicate with the marketplace. Some of the great work you guys are doing and my team as well. So sometimes as you kind of engage in this marketplace, you feel like you're playing this game, where you're trying to get one message across, and by the time it gets there, it's a little bit different. But we're doing our best to try to get positive news out there. The marketplace is tough right now. There's a big cloud, over ag sometimes where the sky is falling and times are tough. But there are some really good people and good technology in the pipeline, And so we're doing our best to get that message out to the channels that can do something with it. And so if I had to summarize, how to market FHB tolerance, and really any trait, added value trait, you need these three things. And if you only have two, there's a good chance it's not going to work. You absolutely need all three. So you have to have a good product, quantifiable evidence. You have to have something that truly is adding value to a seed company, a farmer, or a business. You need the right people that want to represent it, and then timing. So if you have the first two, and unfortunately it's not a good time, there's a good chance you won't be successful. Or maybe it's a great time, but you're missing the top end product, or you don't have the data to support it. Or maybe you've got, two out of three and you just need a person. There's a real lack of talent. So it's always exciting to see the up and coming students. I think there's a lot of good jobs and work in agriculture. And so there's quite a need for people, young people in particular, that want to work hard and bring exciting innovation in the marketplace. So that is my spiel. That's my 2 cents. That's where to find this online. I know your time is valuable. You're really busy students solving problems we don't even know about yet. So I really appreciate the invitation and look forward to staying connected with you guys.
All right, thank you so much for the great presentation. Now we can take a couple of questions. If anyone has any question, you can ask or write it in the chat.
I have a question. So I am new to the world of FHB research. When a farmer is looking for seed and they're looking at all the different traits of that seed, where do they rank a FHB tolerance in the list of things they're looking for?
That's a great question. It is high. I would say, in particular in the Midwest, I would call it a third. So number one across the country is always yield. So bushels in the bin, that's always number one. And I would say our organization does pretty good at that, maybe to a fault because we don't have the strongest fusarium tolerance. But number two, I would say, is test weight, because when a farmer goes to the elevator, they don't get paid extra, but they will get docked if they don't have the required test weight. So for a seed producer or a farmer, those are the top two. I think because year in and year out, those are very consistent things that can either make you money or lose. But in terms of disease, Fusarium, I think, is number one. Well, I believe it's number one. Third in my ranking. So yield, test weight, and then Fusarium tolerance would be right there. Great question, though.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation. It was
I have one question. So, how do you balance between having FHB resistant chains such as FHB1 or FHB7 and the marketing of fungicides as like partnering with Syngenta? Like, how do you put a balance so that you don't have?
Yeah, if you go way back, before the fungicides were as effective as they are now, spraying your wheat at, Feek's 1051 was optional. There were a lot more wheat acres, and the professionalism around raising a good wheat crop wasn't as consistent. Now, the majority of farmers that remain growing soft red wheat, they're spraying their wheat at least once, sometimes more than once, foliar as well. So a lot of our research, this is why we do the input studies, because we need to see the natural infection which is in the scab nursery, and we have some locations that are not treated. But we also want to experience what a farmer would see in an applied situation. So we look for a balance, to your point, of locations that have been treated the way a farmer generally would, but we also want Alan to experience enough infection so he can make good field selections as well. And so, it's definitely a balance. You used the right word there. But one advantage of being in Illinois is, there's so much perennial inoculum and fusarium spores that we can pretty much get an infection in most of our fields every year. The severity kind of depends, but say compared to the South or the Southeast where we sell a lot of wheat, those guys, it might be 1 in 5 years and they see no fusarium. It's not unusual at all for them not, to go years and years and see no scab incidents. So, in our case, it's kind of built in to where we are doing our research. Um, but we also want to be mindful that a lot of guys are good stewards using fungicides as well.
Thank you. Does anyone have any question?
Lawrence, there's one in the Q&A.
Oh, okay. Uh, like Amber, did you say somebody like in
Yeah,
the
somebody
chat?
wrote one in the question and answer. You want me to read it?
Yeah, you can.
It says, "Hi, do you have any marketing presence, sales representative, or research activity in the Midwest, especially in North Dakota? I'm asking because North Dakota is a major wheat producing state with reoccurring FHB pressure."
Hmm. Good question. So in terms of soft wheat, the acres in the Dakotas is really sparse. I mean, the class of wheat that we breed, um, I don't know if you'll find much soft red winter wheat there at all. There's a lot of spring wheat planted in the Dakotas, of course, and hard red winter wheat. Um, and fusarium is an issue, and I agree with you there, right? All along that Red River Valley area, we've seen scab pop up pretty consistent. And so, if you go towards more arid and dry environments, fusarium is less threatening, but that doesn't mean not at all. And so when growers are selecting material, even if it is spring wheat or a hard red winter wheat, fusarium's not something you want to completely forget about, even if the incident and severity isn't, say, as high as it is in Illinois or Indiana. So I guess maybe the short answer is no, we don't have any products um, marketed in that area. But every year we get calls from Texas, from Kansas, from Oklahoma. There are some markets for soft red winter wheat. Even Kansas City comes to mind, where the mills are starting to accept more soft wheat in the hard growing environments, if that makes sense. And the feedback we've gotten is those markets are developing because the protein is a challenging mark to meet, and the soft wheats have a higher yield potential at least. And so even if they don't get a premium, they're able to experience higher yield higher bushels per acre on their soft wheat than on their hard, even in the absence of the protein. So Dakotas is a stretch for us. That's a long answer, but Dakotas is probably right on the fringe.
So I can ask another question. So with opportunities for graduate students like internships, so what are the usual times that you open up like applications for graduate students who might be interested in internships?
I'm so glad you asked.
Yeah.
So, our students will start in about a month, I think on the 18th, May 18th. And it's not long. Depending on what year you are, um, the applications really they go year round. So if you go online, They're up today. You can fill in the information box, and it'll go to Eli. He's kind of the hiring manager. Um, but yeah, so far we're fully staffed for this coming growing season. But usually it starts early in the fall. We go to the career fairs here locally. We start to go through resumes. Usually in that October is when it opens. And we find that the best students are all taken by January. So that's kind of the window we try to do most of our
Okay.
hiring in is October through January. And then, they finish up school here in the spring, work with us all summer, and then we start the cycle again. But if you're encouraged and curious, definitely fill in the box and put in a note that you attended the webinar. We'll get your resume to the top of the pile.
All right. Thank you. Amber, do we have any questions from the Q&A?
No, there are no others.
Okay. Mm, I think it's 5 p.m. and Ken, thank you so much for making time to join us today. Really appreciate.
Yes, same to you. Thanks for having me and stay in touch.
All right, sure. Okay, bye.